Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I really hate to interrupt all of this extraordinarily positive energy that I'm feeling in this room. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so very much for coming to our second event in our speaker series. I'm really very impressed with the participation and the engagement of the entire campus in this discussion. I wanted to spend a few moments orienting everyone and reminding everyone why we're here. Not wanting to be too presumptuous, let me introduce myself. I am Ron Coley. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Business and Administrative Services. We are here for the second installment of our speakers series. I, for one, am really proud of this series. For those of you who were able to join us about a month ago for the event that we had on the 23rd of February, you got a chance to learn about something that my instincts tell me that probably half the people in the room it was a little bit of a foreign language, and it was about a subject called lean, and it was about how the University of Washington employs lean to improve its administrative processes to help the university run better. For those of you who were not here, lean is a system that is about eliminating waste. I'm not trying to suggest that we have waste going on at our university, but we all could benefit from looking at waste. One of the things when I began studying lean, I thought waste was waste. But what I learned in my studying lean was that there are at least 8 different contributors to waste, 8 different ways in which waste can be categorized. And a little acronym there, downtime, is one of the ways to help remember that, and our speaker talked about that. Very important opportunity there. The other things that folks are often interested in, this is the second in a 4-speaker series. And at the end of that series, what's next, Ron? People are beginning to ask me, which is a good thing, because people are anticipating that there is something on the other end of the 4. These are not just 4 socialist gatherings. These are very purposeful meetings. And what I want to do is explain to you what that is really all about. These 4 meetings, we have invited 4, I think, quite distinguished organizations, the University of Washington, Berkeley, the City of Houston, and UCSF, to come to visit with us to explain to us how they do operational and organizational excellence. They are all exemplars of operational excellence, as you saw last month, and you will certainly see here in a moment. The point is that we want to make sure that our campus, you, are informed about what options are available to us as we enter into this discussion on our campus, because we need to do likewise. So this whole effort now is to inform us so that we can, in May or June, reassemble, probably in this very place, and to talk about what does organizational excellence looks like for UCR. It doesn't have to look like Washington, Berkeley, Houston, San Francisco. It needs to look like Riverside. We may take a slice from one of those. We may take nothing from any of them. We get to decide. So it's very important when we call the meeting for May or June, for everyone who has participated in the earlier conversations as a minimum, to come and help us figure out what ours looks like. Now, today, we are very, very fortunate to have our speaker. But before we have our provost come and introduce her, I thought, because I know very intimately what our speaker is going to talk about, and I know that the reference that she's going to be speaking from is very different from the base that we're operating in. So I wanted to take a moment to encourage you not to transfer whatever she is going to say that applies here. Okay? What I decided to do, to give you a graphic that is the graphic that is in my mind about the difference between organizational excellence at UC Berkeley and UC Riverside. We are now in the beginning of this whole journey. Berkeley, we began that journey over a decade ago. And when we began that journey, it felt to me like what's on the left side of the slide that is in front of you. That we were in a canyon, we were in a basement, we were in a cellar. There was just little bitty shafts of light and possibility. We had outdated campus policies, low productivity, antiquated systems, and on and on and on. Lots of very uncomplimentary things for such a distinguished university. Well, at UC Riverside, that's not where we are. We look nothing like the left side of this page. The reason that we should enter into organizational excellence, moving better to a better place, is because we are actually just in a valley. We're on a plateau of excellence. We have decided, by virtue of UCR 2020, that we want to become one of the preeminent research universities. We can't do that without improving our academic and non-academic administrative infrastructure and the way in which we do business. So this should be a fun journey, unlike the beginnings of the journey that our speaker and I began well over a decade ago. But you can see, as you will see from her, that she's still standing after that journey. And so I wanted to give you that as an orientation. I'm going to invite our provost, Paul Denieri, to come and introduce our speaker. Thank you very much for being here.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all here. It's a privilege for me to get to come up here and say a few words as well before I introduce our speaker. We in the senior leadership team, and I think we sense a lot of this around campus as well. We sense that that this campus can become a model nationally for organizational excellence, for how effectively we can run a university and execute the things that need to be done to run a university well. And we also share a conviction that for us to do that, it's going to have to be there's got to be participation from everybody in this room and a lot of other people who aren't in this room to make it work. It's not going to be something that we sit over at Hinderocker and figure out. It's going to be something that we as a community are going to drive from the top down, from the bottom up, from the middle out, and so on. And so it's really encouraging to see so many people here wanting to take part in this second part of our speaker series. So without too much delay then, let me introduce Peggy Huston, who is currently the Chief Operating Officer of Campus Shared Services up at UC Berkeley. And she's been at UC Berkeley for 14 years. And I should say that in my previous job, for those of you who don't know, I came to Riverside about 8 months ago from the University of Florida. And about 5 or 6 years ago at Florida, we started talking about this idea about shared services. And we noodled around it a little bit. And what we fairly learned quickly is that if you wanted to talk about shared services, there was one place you had to look. There was one model, and that was UC Berkeley. That's the place that everybody tells you has done it the most and done it the best and so on. So it's really a privilege for me to having again messed around with it myself to see someone come talk about where it was done probably first and best on an American college campus. Prior to serving in a role as COO of Campus Shared Services, Peggy was director of the Operational Excellence Program at UC Berkeley. And as director of that program, she developed a strategy to achieve the program, the objectives and the goals, and then facilitated the governance process that drove the achievement of those goals. Beyond that, she has a BS in Business Administration and a master's, an MBA in International Business from Cal State East Bay. She also, in 2014, and I think this gets back to what I was saying about her role as a national leader, she received the Leaders of Change Award from the Network for Change and Continuous Innovation in Higher Education. So this is someone, coming who's been doing the kinds of things we're talking about for some time, has done it in a way that's been recognized nationally as the best in its class. And so I hope, I know we'll have a great deal to learn from her, and I'm looking forward to what she has to say. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Ron, and thank you all for being here today. I think first I just want to make a comment on something that Ron just said, and that is that I am here today to share information about what we've done at Berkeley. But it really is for you to take into consideration as you think about what you want to do here at Riverside. And the exercise that we'll do later on this afternoon is to help you begin to think about that and envisioning what does your future look like at UC Riverside. So this subject is very near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time working on operational excellence at UC Berkeley over the last few years, and am really excited about being here today to share this information as you embark on your adventure. So, do I keep going here, or, oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to start with our case for change at Berkeley and some background about how we got started into the OE project, Operational Excellence Project, our implementation, and some specifics about how we implemented the program, and then also wrap up with where are we currently, where have we been able to move the needle, where are we still working on moving the needle, what has evolved over the last few years. And what I'd like as outcomes of this presentation is for you to understand how our desired outcomes have driven our approach, how we have intertwined project management and change management, how we leverage change leaders at all levels of the organization. All of you here today, by the way, in case you don't know it, are change leaders just by virtue of being here at this moment. How we deploy change agents through the organization, and how we keep learning and changing our approach. So I'm going to start with some background information. This probably looks very familiar to Riverside, and if you don't have this information already, you may want to get it. And that's a comparison of what did your revenue sources look like in 2003, and what do they look like today? At Berkeley, it has changed significantly. And with that much of a significant change, it's pretty obvious that we have to make other changes to accommodate the drop in state funding. Berkeley insists on being first in a lot of things, and even here, where we show the trend of the drop in the state funding over time, that this isn't a single data point, it most definitely is a trend. In addition to the financial side, we had a lot of problems, and still do have problems, with our work processes on the campus. And if this is the way things looked on campus, when we think about, we have a large population at Berkeley of people that have worked there for a number of years and are eligible for retirement. And because of our existing systems, knowledge was mostly in everybody's head that was walking around, which was an extremely high risk for the campus. And in order to be able to attract people to Berkeley, high performers, that's what we want, are high performers, then we needed to also make things better in order to be able to attract those people. So we had a unique opportunity in 2009. We had the committed leadership. We had momentum and energy on campus. And that momentum was different because the problems had started to impact the academic side of the house. And so we were looking for, what do we need to do? Because it cannot impact the academic side. We also had commitment from OP. And I have given this presentation in a number of venues, and I often get the question, how did you fund the changes that you made at Berkeley? And that was OP. That was a partnership with OP. That is where our funding came from, in a 0% loan, which I don't know if any of you have found that loan someplace else, but that's a pretty good loan. And then, of course, as I've already indicated, there was also a financial imperative. Just to let you know, we had done a lot of work ahead of operational excellence. There were a number of other activities that had taken place that had begun laying the way for OE. And I would imagine that there's probably a similarity here at Riverside, that you've been doing things over the years that are kind of working toward the effort that you want to do now. And it's also, that was preparation work for the direction that we were going. However, we hadn't been able to make the big change that we wanted to make. And there were questions about, so what's going to be different now? And the difference was our approach. And I'm going to talk more about what was different about the approach. Also, we're going to be talking in our exercise about the case for change. This was Berkeley's case for change, that it was now impacting the academic side of the house. The financial picture wasn't going to change. And we did have all of these things lined up. So if we didn't jump then what were we going to lose as a result of that? The timing was right. Chancellor Bergeneau was the chancellor that started the Operational Excellence program, and he had also started, in advance of OE, beginning to make changes at Berkeley. One of the key changes was he was determined to professionalize the administration on the Berkeley campus and saw that as a necessity for the sustainability of the campus. And so the campus community came to the agreement on, why are we doing this? Our goal was to be the best run university in the country. I shouldn't say was, still is, to be the best run university in the country. To create an effective and efficient operating environment. To create a financially sustainable future. And instill a culture of continuous improvement with greater opportunities for professional growth. So we kicked off with our diagnostic phase. That was the first phase in 2009. And this was a collaboration with a management consultancy, Bain Consultancy, to evaluate our current operations and recommend the areas with the greatest potential for savings. It was a comprehensive study of the cost and the quality of the operational administrative activities and developing concrete options to make those improvements. What came out of the diagnostic phase were the areas where we had the greatest opportunity. And I just want to say that as I just said a moment ago, originally it started off as where is the greatest opportunity for savings? The value of having Bain in there was that Bain held up a mirror, and we had to then see it wasn't just about savings. The campus had underinvested in our workforce, in our processes, in our systems for many years, and it was really ugly. And again, if we wanted a high-performing workforce, we were not set up for that. So the change that we needed to make wasn't just about savings. It was really about improving the administration at UC Berkeley. There was a steering committee in the diagnostic phase that helped us get to this outcome, and that steering committee included leadership and others on campus, student representation, staff representation. It also included people from outside of the university, so alum and business people that are interested in what Berkeley does and want to see that university there in the future. And so the chancellor brought together the steering committee to help him think through what needed to happen at Berkeley. So our foundation then to move forward was effective organizational performance and financial sustainability in order to get to our preeminent academic leadership and to support that. Our goals for the Operational Excellence Program were to reduce the administrative operations by at least $75 million annually, improve efficiency and quality of administrative services, and instill an environment of continuous improvement. 3 very specific, simple goals. A lot of work to get there, but they were very clear. This is just for illustrative purposes. The dots here don't really mean anything. I mean, they're kind of indicative, but not so much. But we looked at what difference do we want to make here? What do we want to be different in the future as a result of carrying out this effort? And so we looked at things like risk compliance. It was very localized, so very distributed across the campus in the past. And we wanted to move toward more centralized compliance, standardized across the campus. We had very limited internal communications in the past, and we wanted to move more toward better and more regular communications in the campus. There were few rewards for performance in the past, and we wanted to move toward performance-based rewards. So the next phase, the second phase, was our design phase. And so a while ago I said, what would be different about our approach with OE than was different in previous approaches? This is what was different. Given the outcomes that we wanted as a result of OE, then we put in place a governing process that would engage leadership all the way to the chancellor and keep leaders actively involved in the progress of the program. So one of our weaknesses at Berkeley prior to OE, that was identified prior to OE, was our inability to get to decisions. We spent a lot of time talking about stuff, but never could manage to get to decisions. An implementation discipline to engage all sectors of the campus in the exploration and design of proposed projects to achieve OE objectives. Hundreds and hundreds of people on campus have participated in OE, including students, faculty, and staff. A program office to educate and enable effective management of the projects and to deliver results. So we were going to put rigor around how we were managing these projects. And new models for financing projects and for realizing and sharing of savings. And I might even say, you know, some of these new models, just the model didn't even exist before. Not that we were revising it, but it just didn't even exist. So the principles that we used in OE, these are the principles that we used in the design phase. And again, we were looking at how do we leverage our strengths, which included we have a clear mission for the institution and a committed workforce. And we also looked at where are the opportunities to improve. One that I just mentioned a minute ago was our decision making. We also have a rather critical environment, meaning that we criticize each other. So if you ever do get to a decision, you can be sure you're going to be criticized for that. And also aligning incentives. So with these being, this combination of opportunities to improve, the behavior wouldn't be I'm going to go out there and make a decision because it would be a tough challenge. The leadership spine is what we called this is an illustration of what we called the leadership spine. And while a lot of the work for OE happens at the implementation or the bottom level here in this diagram or in this illustration, it still requires the leadership participation, and especially to get to the big decisions for campus. And so we were very clear about that we've got to leverage this leadership spine and that those leaders have to be involved and at the table. And when Ron indicated earlier he was intimately involved in this, that was Ron at the top of one of these leadership spines. So the outcome of the design phase was, of these 7 initiatives, were about 50 proposals. And again, to get to these 50 proposals, we engaged hundreds of members of the campus community to get there. Every proposal that came in was reviewed by the OE program office. The coordinating committee, which I'll talk about in just a minute, then developed recommendations for every one of these proposals to accept or not accept it. And then the OE Executive Committee, which again I'll talk about in a minute, made the decisions. So there was a clear decision process to get to which of these would move forward. About half of the projects that were submitted, or the proposals, that were submitted, were approved. About 20 of those ran through to completion. And the projects included things like an online energy management system to manage our energy usage on campus. The shared service center that I am now managing was one of those projects. E-procurement system sponsored by Ron Coley. A metrics model. How do we measure what we're doing, and are we moving toward the goals, the strategic goals for the campus? An enterprise data warehouse, better management of our data on campus. So when we think about, again, what's different about how we're managing the OE program, this program represented an unprecedented number of scope and major changes to improve UC Berkeley. While we had done some things before, we had never done anything at this scale. We did have the opportunity, and still do, to fundamentally change our operational culture by the way we implement these projects and our future projects. OE introduced new tools and processes, but that was just the beginning. It was when we actually started using those new tools to contribute and add value to UC Berkeley that makes the difference, when we actually change our behavior and fully leverage those tools. As I mentioned before, managing this was a combination of traditional project management and change management. And change management was new to Berkeley. This concept was new to Berkeley. Project management is still relatively new to Berkeley, to be quite honest, but change management was even newer. And we, one of the first projects out of the gate was e-procurement with Ron Coley. And we got partway through that project, and then it dawned on us what change management really means. There was a whole effort ahead of us to change behavior and to get the full benefits from this e-procurement system that we were planning to implement. And we had to go back and ask for another $1 million on that project for change management. When the executive committee approved that we were actually going to do change management was when I finally realized we are really going to do change management on campus. I mean, that was a huge, huge step for me, that moment of we are committed to doing this. And so our beliefs about change are that we want to avoid collapsing over the wrong finish line. Just implementing technology is not the finish line. It is getting to the benefits of that technology. If you can't get to the benefits, don't bother implementing it. We wanted to target the behavioral change, co-create to drive better outcomes, and deepen the commitment. Co-create. So that means it's not the project team that goes off into the war room and develops what the implementation is going to be, but that we're right there with the campus units figuring out what is this impact on you going to be and what do we need to do in order to mitigate that risk. The change risks are predictable yet different in every case. We know it's coming. We know the change is coming, and we need to look at who is being impacted and how are they being impacted, and again, how are we going to mitigate that risk? And we can build in repeatability and adaptability so that we can improve upon this over time and get better and better at it. This is an organizational structure sketch that I did myself, which is really bad. My communications people are like, oh my God, don't show that slide. But it gets to, what it was. And so at the top there is the OE Executive Committee, so that is the decision-making body. And the program office is beneath that. And the coordinating committee, so that's the recommending body, is to the left. And they were advising both the program office and the executive committee. Also, the boxes on the right of the program office, we took our direction on a lot of the things that we were doing from existing offices on campus. While we were an independent office that reported to the executive committee, we still followed communications in the way that public affairs did communications. We followed our financial model, followed what the budget office was doing, et cetera. Below the program office, that would be the project or the project team. And every project had a steering committee and maybe had advisory committees also, depending upon the size of the project. And then there were the implementers, and those are the people that actually do the work across the campus. So the executive committee was made up of the chancellor, the executive vice chancellor and provost, vice chancellor of administration and finance, and then also the OE program office has a faculty head, and that faculty head, so there were 4 members to that decision-making body. The coordinating committee included representation of faculty, staff, and students. And the sponsors for the projects who also sat on that coordinating committee, there were 2 sponsors for each of those 7 initiatives in the design phase. A sponsor in from academic at a dean level and a sponsor from administration at a vice chancellor, associate vice chancellor, assistant vice chancellor level. That was also one of the keys to success for this program, was that partnering of the academic and administrative sides of the house. And then the OE program office and project managers. Every project had a project manager. And sponsors of the projects, sometimes it was the sponsors of the initiative, and sometimes there were other sponsors. It depended on who was the right leader there. And so further on our approach, it was a professional project management and change management approach, as I've already said, with detailed budgets and work plans, engagement plans. The teams were temporary. They were to augment operations and then fade away. A consistent methodology. So all project manager leads and sponsors as well went through an onboarding process that the OE program office conducted. And then there was regular cadence of project review and adjustments. And I certainly don't mean to say that we had everything locked up and this was so easy we had no problems, because there were definitely problems, lots of problems. But putting the structure in place then enabled us to deal with the problems and, again, to get to decisions. We had clear decision paths so that we could get to the decisions and move forward. So what's going on now? How are we doing? So again, one of the goals was savings. That was the first one that was on the list. And we are at a current cumulative savings, I shouldn't say current, this is December of 2014, of 112.5 million cumulative. Our run rate is taking longer to get to the 75 million than what we had originally anticipated, but we still believe we're going to be there 2017. And service improvement, how are we doing there? That was the number 2 goal. So staff, faculty, and student leaders are providing input to realize operational excellence, and this is little o, little e as we refer to it. So beyond the program operational excellence, what we want on campus is operational excellence. And so we are still working together, all 3 of these populations, to get to operational excellence and the effective outcomes. Our communications and collaborations continues to improve what we started during the OE program. We have demonstrated and continue to leverage the integration of the project management and change management discipline. Enabling managers to focus on performance management and coaching, so we continue to focus on the development of our managers on campus. We have a much improved view to campus financials now. That was the outcome of one of the projects in OE, as well as the methodology that we used. And then we are also shifting our focus now to a service culture across all of the units that provide services to the campus. In terms of continuous improvement, we're integrating our principles. That this was an outcome of another project in OE, was the development of operating principles for administrative operations. And so those operating principles include working together, being innovative with our thinking, simplifying, being accountable to each other, and working toward a service-oriented organization. And we are embedding those principles throughout administrative operations. Feedback loops. So this photo here is an actual picture of CSS leadership and unit leaders sitting around the table together. The units are preparing to transition into CSS, and so these conversations would usually start off pretty rough, and they would work together until they got to a smooth transition of those units into shared services. So looking at what's the impact going to be and how are we going to manage that impact. Implementing decision process. So we're getting better about decision process and decision making and getting even to a more nimble manner. And I failed to put the note up there. Again, my communications people are like, please don't use your slides. But this one is IT governance. And this was also one of the OE projects was to start up an IT governance model. So they are at the beginning stages now of implementing this model. Business process management, end-to-end, managing end-to-end business processes. So the business processes on the Berkeley campus pass through boundaries. A business process may start in a unit, it may come to shared services, it may go to central HR, back to shared services, back to the unit. How do we manage processes across campus when all of these different areas report up to different leaders on campus? And so we are working toward putting a structure in place that will enable us to manage those processes. And leveraging the strengths that we developed in OE in new ways. So the OE program office, one of the responsibilities that they took on a couple of years ago was around revenue generation projects. So they are now leveraging what we started in OE to begin looking at revenue projects and working with units on how can we bring in new revenue streams into the campus. And this gets back to that financial picture that we can only reduce costs on campus so much. But we have to identify new revenue streams in order to be able to do what we want to do. So this is a critical area for the campus. So lessons learned. In the program office, when we regularly went back and looked at, okay, what have we learned? What have we learned? OE overall was a very iterative process. We would take a step and pause. Okay, how did it go? Should we take the next step or try a different track? And so when we did look back at what has gone well, one of the things that we identified was that we had a clear strategy. And there's a great book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, by a UCLA business professor, Richard Rummelt. And Rummelt identifies that there has to be a kernel for the strategy, and there's 3 pieces to that kernel. The diagnosis of the challenge you're trying to overcome, and in our case, that was our diagnostic phase where we identified the case for change. A guiding policy for the approach to overcoming that challenge, and for us, we developed that in our design phase through developing the governance model, the rigorous management, etc. And then also a clear action plan or concrete steps that we would take to overcome the challenge in accordance with that guiding policy. And that was our implementation phase. And that was planning, risk management, communications, collecting input, measuring. Other lessons learned. I've actually got 3 slides on lessons learned. We learned a lot, yeah. And probably I could do another 3. So again, deploying new technology is not success. It's changing the mindsets and behaviors. The project management must be coupled with change management in order to achieve our desired results and outcomes. Changing behavior takes time and effort. There is no quick path to making that change. And although you can get faster at it over time, it still takes a lot of time and effort. Leveraging the strengths of the organization to achieve the behavioral changes. The leadership must be involved Face-to-face communications, that was one of our lessons learned in the first 30 days, where we were trying to communicate to the campus through written communication, and we had to throw that idea away and start going out and meeting, spending hours and hours and hours meeting with folks. An iterative and incremental development approach. So one step forward, check to see how it went. Communicate, communicate, communicate. There was no too much communication ever. The results of OE must be realized by the units in order to be successful. So again, what are the outcomes and the results that we were going for? Another one that this has just recently now become so apparent, and that was considering long-term impact of multiple system changes at one time, and that impact in terms of the organizational stress as well as long-term costs. And that is my presentation. So now what I'd like are questions, and there's microphones that are set up here, and I'm assuming since we're videotaping that you've got to talk into the microphone. Yes, I'm getting a head nod, yes. And so I'd really like questions, and I'd also like to hear from you about what you are doing here at Riverside, because I'm interested, and what have you learned so far, and as you're preparing on this adventure, but also the work that you've probably already done to some extent here. So yes.
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate the talk. It's very nice. The question I have relates to one of the drivers you mentioned early on was the impact of the financial crisis actually all the way down to the academic units.
Right.
On slide 24, you included one of the principles as a workload would shift from the staff to the faculty, if I read it correctly. Slide 24 was the slide. And I get involved in a lot of conversations with faculty about how they're overloaded with administrative duties and not able to do what they came here to do. So maybe I misread that.
I think it's the wording here that's confusing. And so what we had to be careful of was workload shifts to faculty.
Okay.
That is what we wanted to avoid. And so we did not want that to happen. And yeah, to be really clear, we didn't want that to happen. Although we are still getting a lot of, this is a really interesting thing that's going on. So the world is moving towards self-service. You know, ATMs, when ATMs first came out, there was no doggone way I was going out to that machine when there was a perfectly good human being inside to take care of my business. And so it happened. ATM happened, and now we've got these phones that we can do just about everything with. And then there's the world at the university. Maybe it's different here at Riverside, but Berkeley the faculty isn't necessarily on board yet with self-service. Some of them are. They tend to be newer to faculty, newer to Berkeley, but they're not necessarily on board with self-service. So shifting the workload from staff to faculty, the perception, if we're going the direction of self-service, is that we are shifting workload to faculty. However, like I said, there are some faculty that are like, could you just give me access to that system and let me do that myself? It's much easier for me to do it than it is for me to explain to you what I want for you to do. And so we're kind of in this shift right now that's happening. What we didn't want to do was take workload that could happen with staff, and we're reducing staff while we're increasing the administrative workload for faculty. So we most definitely did not want to do that. So I apologize for the wording on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the clarification.
So one question that I have, though, is, so I work in our Office of Student Life. We work with student organizations. And one of the things that we are trying to find out is how do we find that balance? So to get faculty to engage with students outside of the classroom. Because as our students are having those opportunities to learn about things within inside the classroom, have you all find a model to where at Berkeley, where you've been able to have, for example, faculty who would serve as advisors or to go on trips with students to engage in that relationship? Because one of the things that we found is that it's wonderful to have that self-serving process where they can go and do things online, but our students are, here at Riverside at least, are really wanting to have those discussions in person, that face-to-face communication as you were talking about. Have you found a way that has worked to get faculty to have those discussions maybe outside of their critical areas of expertise and maybe more about this is what it's like to go on a canoe, on an outrigger, or to go hiking, and to help develop that relationship beyond, what it's like to be an expert in chemistry?
So I can comment on a couple of things that came up around that during the operational excellence. One of them has to do with with online teaching. So there's been a concern of if we go to online teaching, then that reduces that even further. And so we have tested several different models of online teaching at Berkeley. And I guess this is I'm confusing my previous hats. This kind of gets to revenue generation also. And so around the online teaching, that there are being able to film a professor that studies what's the water coming over the dam is hydro whatever, that studies that the professor could actually be in the dam, and they're filming the professor giving the lecture and talking about what's actually happening, right there. And so we could actually take a classroom, go further than what a student would get if they were sitting in the classroom by having the professor on video and teaching live, as close as they could get to live. So around online teaching, we've been exploring, how do we enable that and also still get time with the faculty member. There was another idea that I thought of, advising. That was the other idea. Okay, advising was an operational excellence project, and that is to professionalize the role of the advisor. And that also is face time with students, and that we did want to shift there the non-value add work that advisors were doing and getting them to really add value to any time that they had with a student, to have that be much more valuable. And so we brought in, we hired a position that is now doing curriculum for advisors on campus, and they're all going through a program. Excuse me. There's a national organization for advisors, and coincidentally that group met on the Berkeley campus last year, and we had something like 80% of our advisors attended that conference. So it's really getting advisors to a much more professional level, again, investing in the development of our advisors. So I think that was also some more face time with the students. But that's all I can speak to in terms of what we've done through the OE program office or through the OE program. There may be a lot of other things that are happening at Berkeley on that subject that I'm just not aware of. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Presentation was fantastic, really interesting. I wanted to ask specifically, you mentioned that Berkeley worked with Bain Consulting on the diagnosis phase of the project. Was that the extent of involvement of external organizations or consultants? I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the partnership or any partnerships that were involved in, or any of the principles or resources used in terms of standing up your designing your overall initiatives, just standing up the OE office there on campus, or things like that, and how you went about doing that. Was that an organically Berkeley thing, or did you partner with someone on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bain came in for the diagnostic phase, and so Bain worked with us from, I think it was September or October of 2009 until the report was published in April or May of 2010. They stayed on to work with us through the design phase for two areas. One was organizational simplification, and that project was a flattening of the organization, so reducing the number of supervisors, managers. We had a large number of supervisors and managers that were supervising or managing one person, and so we worked toward professionalizing the manager role and also the individual contributor role, but teasing those apart, that there's a manager that manages and there's the individual contributor. So they helped us with that project to get to every, we divided the campus up into 28 units based on colleges or administrative offices, and so to get to our plan for each of those units. And then they also stayed on to help us with the procurement project. And the key reason for helping with the procurement project was because we had no data on the campus for procurement. We had a lot of paper, though, individual purchase orders that were on paper, and Bain brought in an army that transcribed from paper into a database system so that we could begin measuring. And if they hadn't have done that, we did not have the resources to be able to do that. So they helped set us up for planning the e-procurement project. So they stayed on through December of 2010 in those two areas to help us get up and going. In terms of other resources that came in to help us with projects, as I mentioned, every project had to have a project manager, and that project manager had a dotted line to me in the program office then. Some of those project managers were people that were already on campus. However, they had to take this as a job, as a contract position. So they had to give up whatever else they were doing to be the project manager. So I wanted dedicated resources for these projects so that they could be successful. If we weren't willing to dedicate the resource, then the project wasn't going to be able to be successful. And some project managers, though, I also hired in, or sponsors hired project managers in, which was fine with me. They still worked with me in the program office. So we did hire in resources. We also hired in resources on the project teams in other positions. And then, again, the project team falls away at the end of the project, and operations takes over at that point. So those resources that we brought in fell away. That's not to say that some of the resources that came to work with us on projects didn't then take positions on campus, because that did happen. We found some good people during that process. So did that answer the question? Or did you have more?
Sorry. I guess I was just wondering, the design and the principles that you articulated, I thought they were very impressive. What I guess what I was wondering is that, did you have that critical knowledge mass there at Berkeley already, or was that some of the value that of individuals that you brought in from the outside in terms of the overall structure and governing principles and things like that?
So the program office was the structure of how we were managing the projects. That was my leadership and how we were going to manage the projects. The setting up the OE program office to begin with, that was a suggestion of Bain to the executive leadership on campus to have an office that was managing this effort. And because I had the only program office on campus in the office of the CIO, it was all fortunate for me. I got interviewed on how I would set up an office if I were doing OE, and then luckily I got to apply for the OE job too as a result of that. So that's where that came from. But Bain was instrumental in the diagnostic phase of helping the campus focus in on what areas have the greatest potential and start with those areas. And there were other things that were not, that were taken into consideration but did not end up being one of the things that we focused on. As an example, space. Space is the final frontier on the Berkeley campus. And that was decided, you know, we have enough battles to fight right now. Let's set space aside for a while and figure out how to do this, and then we'll circle back around and pick up space later on. So there were some things that were decided that that wouldn't happen. And Bain was also really helpful in again, think strategically about how you want to do this. Yeah.
My question's a little bit simpler, I think, to
Okay.
answer. At the beginning, when you were talking about sponsors, you said every project had an administrative and an academic sponsor.
Every initiative.
How
Yeah.
did you pull that off? And
So
how
there
did
were,
you-
so again, there were 7 initiatives, so that's 14, first of all. So there's a finite number. And the chancellor is the one, so the administrative sponsors were kind of by their job. So Ron didn't get, he didn't get shared services, he got procurement, because procurement was already there in Ron's shop. But the academic that was going to partner with him, that was the chancellor. And the chancellor called who he wanted to be those folks. He consulted with some people, but then he called up. Who,
Were they all from the business school? I mean, how did...
No.
No.
No. As a matter of fact, Ron's partner was from a science division. Which science division? Biological sciences. See what happens when you're the sponsor of an OE project. Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Peggy, my question might be a little bit sensitive. I didn't get a chance to look at the detail, but you identified a whole list of areas where there's been significant cost savings as a result of the OE efforts that you've gone through over the past 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Largest single expense in any organization is payroll.
Yep.
How much of the savings were related to the efficiencies of having fewer people, because you could make the systems work better without the people, and did that create problems with getting people to buy into the change effort if that was the case?
So first I want to say that the obvious is that to think that the savings will come from the reduction in people.
Yeah.
The procurement project has the potential to surpass anything that we could save on people. So I do want to say that we're not there yet. We still have work to do to get better at how we buy things. And so the potential for the significant amount of savings could come from could come from there. But there was savings, and the organizational simplification project was exactly that. It was eliminating positions, and we eliminated about 250 positions. About half of those were filled positions. Half of them were not filled. And so, so how did we go about doing that? Earlier we were talking about, I said, sometimes I get the question of, from people of, did you have any resistance on campus? And there was a really thick, high wall of resistance, and especially when that was the first project out the gate was, we're going to do this organizational simplification. So at first everybody was, no, you're not going to do that. And we, in order to come up with plans for each unit to come up with a plan, we first gave them, here's your data on your staff, and they started with, no, your data's all wrong. Well, actually, it's your data. You put it into the system. We just took it out and showed it to you. And so you need to clean up your data first. So that was one thing, was we said, okay, you tell us what's the right data, and then that's the data that we'll use. So now they had ownership of the data. They could no longer argue that. However, they still found reasons to argue. The other thing was that we worked really hard with the executive committee, because we needed the executive committee to act as a team. And we knew that Dean so-and-so is going to run around us and go right to the chancellor or right to the provost and start to negotiate. Why, their unit's a little different than the other units. They think it's a great idea, but they really can't do that in their unit. And we needed them to not make decisions on the spot and instead come together as a team to make their decisions. And so we were able to do that also. And we did have 2 or 3 people that pulled the runaround. And then once the message got out that the executive committee was making decisions as a team and they were not making exceptions, people started to look at, okay, what other options do I have? Then we came out with a savings incentive for them, that the reduction that they got to, so their plans were due in December. Our fiscal year is July through June. Their plans were due in December. And so we offered them any savings that they made on their plan up to the following June, is they keep 100% of that savings. They each had a target that they had to achieve. They had a span of control target and they had a savings target. Up to the savings target, Central Campus would take 40%, the unit kept 60%, and anything over that target, the unit kept 100% of that. So right away, some deans started doing the math, and suddenly we were on our way. We were on our way. And then we got some comments of, well, I've been wanting to do this for a while anyway, now I'll make it happen. Yeah, so that was kind of coming up with several ways to get people on board. Yeah. Hey.
I don't know if this is working or not.
There it is.
I'm an undergraduate advisor here at UCR in the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences, and I saw that you mentioned about some professionalism. Somebody came and worked in a curriculum, and so I'm just wondering, how is advising organized at Berkeley? I mean, is it a departmental advising? Is it a group of advisors in one place and they advise all majors, or certain advisors advise certain majors? So I'm just curious about how it works there.
Okay, maybe Ron can help me with this, but I think that it's also evolving right now. So the undergraduate advising was very distributed, although because undergraduate, there is no dean of undergraduate on campus. It's distributed. But we now have a position was created to help pull that together for advising. And so they've been working at, it's not that they report together, but that they come together and how do they improve upon advising. And then there is a dean of the graduate division for campus, and I think advising happens there as well as in the units where the students, which I think is much different than undergraduate, right? Yeah. So this is probably like out of my...
Okay. Well, I'll try to do a little research then. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for, is it working? Okay. Thank you for the excellent presentation. I got a lot of things to think about. Now for the question. So I want to know, what is your recommendation around change management, which essentially boils down to changing behaviors? And what is your recommendation around linking that to the project management or the program management? And were you able to assess after the project was over?
And I'm sorry, so what was around change management, what was my
so
what?
What is your recommendation around linking changing behaviors with program management or project management?
The determination, or
yes,
around linking those, yeah. And then in terms of measuring?
Yes, measuring or metrics that you use to measure.
Yeah. So I think one of the metrics would be, and this is kind of an anecdotal metric, is that we were able to accomplish projects and get to results which hadn't happened in the past without having change management in there. And there was actually a project, a specific project, just before OE kicked off, which was an upgrade of our financial system on campus, a fairly significant upgrade of our financial system on campus, where the leadership had decided that the units could figure out on their own how to adjust when that upgrade happened, because it would be a cost if we were to try to help them figure that out. So they were going to independently get to figure out how to adjust within their unit once we did this upgrade. So the upgrade technically was a success. It crashed and burned on day 2, though. Or what's the other, the patient died on the table on day 2. So it wasn't such a success overall because we had not put that change in process. And then for the next 3 months after that, we were scrambling, and it cost a lot more to try to recover than if we had invested in the first place. And that actually was a really strong piece of information then when we started into the OE projects, and the situation where I said earlier that we had to go back and ask for additional funding for our e-procurement project for change management. That was our argument, is you will be living through the financial system upgrade again if we don't apply change management in our methodology, and there is a cost to doing that, and it's a cost to actually do the work of analyzing what's the impact going to be, who's going to be impacted, how are we going to mitigate this. It also lengthens the time of implementation, which in and of itself is additional costs. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question yet.
No, these are all good answers. I wanted to find out specifically, or your recommendation. So if an organization has not felt that kind of pain when the project was burning on the second after it went live, the motivation to spend dollars in change management is very little. So what case can be made, or how do we show tangibly if this is not in place, what's the reaction going to be?
Right.
So I wanted to learn from you some recommendations for this university.
And I think that is also, I mean, there is work that you can do. Again, an impact analysis is you would look at who are your stakeholders in this, who are going to be impacted when we roll this out, and what is that impact going to be? And they have to participate in that. It can't be, again, the project team working in the closet that's saying, well, I think it's going to be this, you know. No, go ask the person who's actually doing that work, what impact is this going to have? And through their supervisor and manager, what impact is this going to have for your organization? And there's a cost associated with all of that, of if we don't do the planning ahead of time, what are we up against then? What are we going to have to recover from?
Sure. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Hello. I work in CNAS in Grad Student Affairs, and our office is a centralized office, but we are all generalists. So I noticed one of your points was you wanted to move from people being more generalist to being more specialized. Less, doing things more automated. How did Berkeley help departments go from this attitude of generalism to being more specialized?
I think that's actually happened through shared services, because the folks that remain in the departments are still predominantly generalists, because they, especially if a department only has one person or two people on their staff, that person's wearing many hats, and they're not going to be able to get away from that. A larger unit like the business school or the law school that's got many staff, they can have people that specialize in something, but they're not going to. The little departments, we're still going to have generalists on campus, but we did move overall for the campus toward more specialty by moving to shared services and having people that specialize in HR, or they specialize in business and financial services or research administration. In shared services, we don't have people that are doing all of those things. Although a research administrator, too, depending upon who they're working with on campus, you know, they're still focusing on research administration, although they may be it may be flowing over into other areas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Peggy, when you get a moment, you begin to talk about shared services. I think it would be very important to give folks an overview of what shared services is, because what you've talked about so far, they can't understand because we have shared services here, but it looks nothing like the shared services that you're operating.
Okay. There was another question here.
You mentioned how important communications is to the process throughout.
Yes.
Could you give us some recommendations, do's and don'ts, things that you found particularly effective over the course of time as you took so many different units through the process?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, a lot of face-to-face conversations. So face-to-face, we met a lot with deans. We were at the academic senate meetings. We were regularly at the Council of Deans meetings, at their retreats every year. Chief administrative officers, we met with them regularly at their meetings, in their units, wherever they were on campus. And then with students. And the students actually created a class around operational excellence as a study for credit. I mean, they actually got credit for this class. And they were looking at, you know, what all is happening, and various folks that were working on different projects would go and give presentations in the class on the project and what the outcome would be for campus. We had student liaisons that worked with us in the OE program office. And then we met with the Graduate Assembly and the ASUC regularly. On the coordinating committee, we had the president of the Graduate Assembly, the president of the ASUC. So lots and lots of face-to-face meetings with all of the different populations on campus. In addition, we had, in the program office, we had we sent out regular updates that people could subscribe to those updates. And then if it was information about a change, not a process change, but a change in how we were going to do something on campus. For example, the chancellor announcing, we are going toward shared services and this is what it's going to look like. That kind of a communication would go out on a blast email to all of campus, everybody. And so we looked at communications. Again, this was early on, and this was a lesson in the first month for me. When it actually started before I started to work there, and it took 8 weeks to get one email out, one message. I was like, oh, we need a process for communications and a decision process, and that we had to decide whose job is it to send out this communication. And so if it was a significant change for the campus, that should come from the leadership, and then the question was which leadership? Is it the chancellor? Is it the executive committee? Is it a sponsor? And then if it's about process, well, that can be the project team or the operations that they're working with that sends that communication. So it was really looking at what's appropriate for this, who to send this communication. And then who provides content. I mean, this one that took 8 weeks, I swear 50 people must have had to participate in the content of this thing. And I'm thinking, you're not even adding content, you're just editing this thing, you know. And so it's like, not everybody needs to provide content to it either. So we would be specific about who had to provide content, who did we need to pass this by before it went out, but trying to limit that down to as few people as we possibly could. So again, to get faster about being able to get communications out. We also tried in the program office to help project teams manage communications. If they were sending out significant communications, that we kind of served as air traffic control. You know, there's already a big communication going out on that day. Can you go out the day before or the day after that, rather than both going out at the same time? So trying to stage that and help so that, you know, the person on campus isn't getting hit with everything at the same time also. And I think that's what comes to mind first. Anything specific that you were looking for? Okay.
We have so many different things changing at the same time, so I think part of it is clarification and how much of this we sort of wrap around this concept of OE in a sea of acronyms, a sea of logos, other kinds of things that we're dealing with. So, yeah, thank you.
And we did not have, and we still don't have, a good internal communication structure at Berkeley. It's something that we are still working on. We're better today than we were several years ago, but it's still a struggle sometimes to get a communication out and to get it to the people that it needs to get to. And when we started off, we had this idea that we would send communications to leaders, and then that information would cascade into their organization. Okay, some units cascaded information, but as soon as it hit somebody who wasn't such a cascader, it stopped. It just stopped. And sometimes that was the person at the very top. It never went any further, you know. So we were trying to figure out, you know, how are we going to manage that? And you can't not communicate to the leaders. So we started doing, you know, a communication to the leaders, and then we would give them so much time to communicate within their organization before we sent out an email to everybody then, because we wanted to try to get to everybody. So it was like trying to you know, again, testing. Try one thing and then test. Okay, so question?
I just have a quick question. Yeah. I'm from actually enterprise risk management. And so I was just kind of wondering, in looking at, because there are changes that go on in every organization, and looking at your goals based on the 7 initiatives that you have, was there anything that was outside of the box that was not available on the table to be viewed for change management or for the OE project? Was there anything that you said, we're just not touching now in relation to this overall change that we're going to be doing? Or was pretty much everything available to be
in the diagnostic phase?
In the diagnostic and
everything was on the table in the diagnostic phase. Yes, yes. Then once the targets were identified, we stuck with the targets.
Okay, so there wasn't any scope creep or anything like that in there?
Not in that way, there wasn't. No, not in that area.
Targets.
But I do want to say that student was one of the initiatives. And it was kind of interesting the way that student came out. So we did do advising, as I'd already mentioned, but there were a number of proposals that came forward about various systems that had to do with delivering student services. Mm-hmm. And that's one where, when the proposals came forward, it was obvious that these were short-term Band-Aids. And it started to become very clear how awful our student systems were based on these proposals that were coming in. And so the decision there was that rather than investing in these Band-Aids that weren't going to add a lot of value, they would add some, but not a lot, and certainly not long-term, that we would be better off to invest in looking at how to fix the problem. And we definitely had a problem. And so as an outcome of that, so the OE project was really around identifying what the problem is with our current student systems. And now the campus has kicked off a student information systems project. So we holistically looked at the student systems, and we are now working towards solving that problem rather than this bunch of little problems. One of the things that we did in the short term, though, was that students had to go to Sproul Hall to get one piece of business done, and they had to go down to University Hall to get another piece of business done, and they had to go over here to get this done, and students were traveling around. And this was a great argument. The student that was on the coordinating committee brought this up. That costs us. You know, you're costing us time. We have to walk a mile just to figure out, what do we owe you this month? And that was really interesting. And so one of the things that we did was move those services into one location so they could go to one place to get all of those services done. And then we looked at, we had multiple systems providing financial information, and it was nearly impossible for a student to figure out where they stood financially. Unless they were, and we have some smart kids there, but they could not figure this out. And so we also came up with a single page with all these funky systems are still behind it, but a single page that showed a student where they stood financially. Now, all those funky systems are on the table to be replaced by student information systems. And so this while we didn't go with their projects in OE, it definitely put us on the right path to deliver better services to students in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just have a quick question about the total budget for this effort, and so including what OP contributed, what Berkeley contributed, and over what time frame was that budget?
Yeah. So the budget was $75 million investment, and OP contributed 50, and the campus contributed 25, or close to that. And again, the OP was a loan, so we are now paying back that loan. And so the savings that we took from that unit restructuring is what we pay back the loan with. So savings, other savings that have happened through other projects, the unit, not in all cases, but in most cases, the unit keeps whatever savings they get out of. So if they're purchasing in new ways now because of the e-procurement system, they keep all of that savings. Yeah. Okay, campus shared services. So campus shared services was the largest project. I paused because we also implemented a single timekeeping system and went to the biweekly pay cycle, and I have to say that was a pretty significant project too. It sounds so simple, but it was a pretty significant project. But shared services is the largest project, and the shared services at Berkeley has 4 functional areas that we provide services in, and that is HR services, business and financial services, so that's procurement and travel and entertainment, and IT, which is desktop support, and also research administration. So those are the 4 functional areas. And we provide those services to, the method that we used was to transition cohorts of units into shared services. So as a unit rolled in, they would be provided with whatever of these services applied to their business. So as an example, not all units have research administration, so not everybody gets research administration. But if they have a need for this, they're provided with this service. And we are in the process right now of the last cohort, which at the end of this last cohort, we're at somewhere between 95 and 99% of the campus, depending upon how you cut up the campus to look at it. We're providing services to that much of the campus. The method also that we chose for shared services was to transition in units as is. So we did not standardize our processes before we transitioned into shared services. We transitioned the units, and now that we're at the last cohort, the work ahead of us is the standardization of processes. So right now in shared services, I have people that are sitting next to each other providing the same service, but in completely different ways because the units rolled in with different processes. So that's a body of work that's yet ahead of us. I took this position as the Chief Operating Officer in October of last year, so I've just been in the position 3 months. While I've been involved with this project from the very beginning with my role in the OE program office, It's a very different view in this seat than it was in the other seat. And one of the biggest surprises to me in shared services is the amount of manual work that's going on in shared services. And this is because we transitioned everything in as is. And while I knew it was there, I've been on campus for a number of years, it's different when you see it in little pockets, you know, here and there, than if you transfer it all into one area, and especially in the area of HR. So it speaks to going back to our case for change of why we needed to do OE in the first place. You know, we are still filling out pieces of paper like you would not believe and moving them from one area to the next and typing into one system and then typing into another system and then typing into a third system. And it's, you know, we can do better. We can do better than that. What else, Ron, about shared services would this group? How big is it? So staff? Currently we're at about 750 in shared services. This is high. We knew when we were planning for this project that we would have to staff up to make this change. This was one of the recommendations actually that we got. We talked to the University of Oregon. They have successfully implemented a shared service center there. And they had said staff up so that you can make, you need people to make this change happen. And then you're going to have to settle into that. So I am now looking ahead at, okay, now how do we settle into this? We've got to standardize our processes. We need to introduce technology for workflow. And we also have to develop, train and develop our employees. We have a lot of employees that have transferred in from campus, and their skill level varies considerably depending upon, most often, how much money the unit that they had, that they were in, how much money that unit had, and invested in their employees. So it's a broad range, and we've got a lot of work to do to enable our staff to be successful in the jobs that they have. Okay, so now we're going to do the exercise?
Yeah. Okay. We're going to take a little break first. But before we take our break, what I wanted to do is I appreciate all the questions that you asked Peggy. She just has she's just a font of knowledge. She spent the last decade and a half in the really deep end of the pool at Berkeley, transforming Berkeley, and there is no individual at Berkeley who has touched more transformational change, I'm prepared to say, probably in the history of Berkeley. This last 15 years, and especially the last 5 or 10, have been just monster years. She's been kind enough not to say it, but I can assure you that I look probably 3 or 4 years younger than I did a year ago, okay? Because which tells you how delighted I am that I'm here. I do want to take a moment to, one question was asked, which I thought was really a very important question that I wanted to amplify the answer that Peggy gave, and had to do with my interpretation of the question was the value of change management. And the change management, in my estimation, is a very, very relevant thing, irrespective of how complicated the change is. Because all change, in the final analysis, is all about us. It's all about people. And you can change the mechanics, you can change the systems, you can change the processes, you can change the policies, you can change the da-da-da-da-da. But none of that really matters if you don't have the operator, the people who are actually engaging with it, if they don't, first off, understand how to operate it, and second off, believe that it's worth doing. So you got to get people to believe, because that is the difference between good and great. The believing that, yes, this is the right thing to do, and you give just a little bit more effort to be able to make certain things happen, and it really makes a big difference. I also want to put a cap on the fact that those things that stood out in my mind that really made it stick is that it was joint ownership. I saw when Peggy mentioned that, I saw a couple of people raise up and not imagining that the academic community and the administrative community could work as closely together. And how did that happen? Well, some of it happened literally under duress. I remember that the gentleman who is now the president of the University of Michigan, the last thing that he wanted to do, I'm absolutely convinced, the last thing that he wanted to do was to partner with me in transforming Berkeley's procurement system. Like, Ron, and I can remember our first meeting together. He was like, okay, Ron, and it was actually in my office, and he had it in my office so he could leave very quickly, I'm sure. Said, okay, Ron, I'm here, and this is going to be a really, really quick process. What I'm interested in is how do we do this in the most expeditious and the minimalist fashion, because I got real stuff to do. Yes, Dean Switzel, I really respect that, but this is not going to be worth doing if we're going to approach it in that way. And so we had to have 3 or 4 meetings one-on-one, and I was very, very happy that after about the 4th or 5th meeting, he began to see that, oh, okay, I get it. It's not just about implementing the e-procurement system. It is about changing the people, the behaviors about it. So that was very important. The rigor and we were very fortunate with someone like Peggy, who you can tell just from her approach here that she is about getting it done. She's focused on it, and everybody on campus understood the value of that. Leadership engagement. This dean that I was working with, and it happened with all the deans, had I gone to him to ask him to partner him with this, he'd probably still be laughing. Well, what he did was he picked up a call from the chancellor, and he explained to me, Ron, I don't want to be here. The only reason I'm here is because I respect Bob, the chancellor, as much as I do, and he asked me to do it. Now, how quickly can we get this done? All right? So that was the piece. Accountability. Everybody was accountable for it, and if you didn't deliver, you were removed. And that is still that case to the day. We had, in fact, the name will go unmentioned, but the person who was, it might even be before Peggy got into her position, but the person who was the academic head of the project came in with a lot of fire, very, very critical position, but for some reason or other, it wasn't fitting very well. He had an incident which provided actually a convenient opportunity for him to be able to move off to another side. And then we got the absolute best person on campus to be Peggy's partner, Andrew Seary, who helped to lead that. And finally, I would say resolve, just being persistent and not willing to let it go. And consequently, it has, as I've told many of you, I'm pretty convinced that when I arrived at Berkeley in 1998, Berkeley was challenging to be the worst administrated university in the nation, and that is not hyperbole. I am absolutely convinced of that. And but now we have the head of the program who's going around the country telling people what transformation looks like. So why don't we take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and do our workshop. Thank you very much.
A volunteer from each table. And your poster. You can take the poster off the wall. And then I also need a couple of the ambassadors here as scribes. Yep, yep. And you can come on up. Come on up. Can I get a couple of the ambassadors to volunteer to scribe for me? No. Is she also going to scribe? I think it's going to be helpful to have two of you there because we're going to go really fast. Okay, so Luis? Yes. Louis? Yes. Louis, I want you to read from your poster there, I want you to read a couple of the current challenges, 2 or 3 of the current challenges that you face into the microphone for everybody to hear.
Less people doing more, lack of professional development, and not a service solution university.
Okay, next. What? You're going to have to go down this road. Okay, from the same box, 2
same
or
box.
3.
So we actually bulleted 5, so let me choose real quick here. Competing for dollars, the same dollars. Complex processes that don't always make sense, duplication of effort, and you want me to quit? Yeah.
Same box, 2 or 3 of them.
Okay. Doing more with less staff, poor training to implement systems, lack of communication.
Thank you. Same box.
Organizational changes, revenue, state versus university, staffing levels, risk key roles, retirements.
Thank you. And one more, same box.
Lack of integrated systems, clearly defined routing and processes, and the sharing and educating of information within and across departments.
Okay, so in box 1, how does that resonate with the rest of the group? Familiar? Yeah. All right, so let's move on now to the future with the current challenges. If we do nothing and maintain the status quo, what do we have to look forward to? So 2 or 3 from this box.
We're a reactive culture. We're falling behind to meet our mission of operational excellence, and we have a decrease on our return in investment.
Okay, we had the best of us would leave, duplicate efforts, and increased costs.
Okay. If we do nothing, we'll have continuing decrease in efficiency, which puts at risk our grant gaining ability. We won't be such a we won't be a magnet for the grants that we need to be a magnet for. About space, if we don't, the challenge of space, if not met, will retard recruitment goals and both of faculty and the students and the staff we're going to need for our vision. And regarding antiquated business processes, will be will fall further behind best practices, which becomes a competitive disadvantage.
So if these challenges remain ongoing, we're going to become increasingly reactive and inflexible. We're not going to be the employer of choice nor the university of choice for staff, faculty, and students. In addition to that, Strategy 2020 will become Strategy 2050.
It'll result in serious staff burnout and increased error rates.
Thank you. Okay, is that what you want here at UC Riverside? So let's start looking forward. What are the opportunities then here at UC Riverside? So 2 or 3 from this box, yeah.
So 2 or 3 opportunities that we currently have to overcome the current challenges is that we have a great career development process that's online where we can sign up for classes as well as take some of those classes on time. There are some amazing departments who've come up with really great ways to build technology systems and improve technology systems. And so having more of a chance for meetings like this where we can share those opportunities with each other. And then also individually, we've had some great opportunities to mentor, or some of us have been able to find great mentors who help us be able to then provide information for us as those people are succeeding to other areas, other campuses, or retiring.
We have some great leadership support right now, as evident for these sessions that we have going on, so that's really helping us. And I think the momentum from other campus changes is really going to help continue changes. Again, keeping up the momentum and making sure that we're continuing to move forward.
One of our opportunities is that we have a lot of data. So we don't have to invent data, we have to organize it and figure out how to integrate it. We have, I think we have gotten the campus to a change readiness point. We're open to change. We have examples of systems that are beginning to end, soup to nuts, and we have to do more of them, sort of use that as a model of how to create a streamlined process and efficiency. I think that's it.
Wow, you got applause.
So one of the things we recognized was that we have a lot of challenges with new faculty, new staff, and we said we develop a onboarding process with effective and recurring training and accountability based into it. We would be in a much better place. We need to find a way to fund and recognize professional development and people that engage in it, and then engage in collaborative meetings with units that have specialized services so people know they exist and what they do.
Okay, so if UC Riverside took advantage of those opportunities, what does the future look like then? So 2 or 3 out of the lower.
From what we focused on regarding our challenges, we saw, mainly from the staff point of view, that there's going to be more of an investment from the staff. That means greater work production, just an overall improvement in the workflow and from the top down and the down up. So overall, a really big improvement in staff morale.
We could continue our recruitment and retention of top researchers and employees. We could continue to become a leader in educational excellence and increase our focus on mentorship and training.
Job satisfaction and wellness, therefore will bring engaged employees, then will be the university looked as the model.
Reduce or eliminate the risk for a reputational risk and become the university of choice for employers, faculty, and students.
We would have the opportunity to be proactive. We will be able to obtain operational excellence through well-trained staff, students, faculties. and happy customers, the same as our staff, students, and faculty.
We could become a national model for first and second generation student success, enhancing international reputation and rankings.
We have an opportunity to streamline and simplify our processes, make things easier on us. In doing so, we'll have the opportunity to save money, and also we'll have increased satisfaction among students, staff, and faculty.
We'll have the opportunity to develop better managers who will better manage our resources and commitment to service culture.
I'll shoot a couple more up. Most of ours have already been stated, but we also thought that through these changes we'll attract higher caliber employees and higher caliber students that want to come to UCR.
Okay, here are the wins. The wins, we'll think of ourselves, our staff, and we'll think of ourselves as increasingly professional and less generalists. Less as generalists, will decrease will decrease the time to occupancy for space, and that is implied in the growth of the campus. So it's important that we be as agile and as fast as we can to create the space we need, and we'll get a competitive advantage, and we'll continue to hire the very best people from Berkeley.
Okay, so with all the strategies you've heard so far, what this will do is it'll break down silos. We'll become stronger collaborators across all campus. We'll become more proactive and nimble. That will enhance our reputation, and Strategy 2020 will actually be Strategy 2020.
We'd create an atmosphere where everyone's ideas are valued, and we'd have engaged and loyal employees, and the last one here, happy campers. Smiley face.
Most of ours have already been spoken to, but again, I can't emphasize strongly enough the increased staff and faculty motivation and decreased stress, more happy staff and faculty, which leads to retention and stronger engagement. Also being able to reinvest and generate funding to new resources, and of course meeting the 2020 vision and improve academic profile of students, and of course fulfill UCR's overall mission.
Developing efficiency, streamlining everything, which will help for staff to have less stress and help with their workload, and then it allows them to have a better work and life personal balance. We have faster processing times, retention of institutional knowledge. We end up losing a lot of staff to other campuses, other jobs, and so if we end up having better systems, things like that, we'll be able to keep staff longer. We would have a lot of us where we don't have a lot of time for planning because we're overworked. So if we end up developing these systems in place, we'll have more time to plan and figuring out some more solutions to challenges that we have. And then opportunity for growth for not only the individual employees, but for the departments, and then having buy-ins from the whole part of campus.
I think that sounds pretty fabulous. What do you think? I invite you to give yourselves a round of applause. I mean, that would be a wonderful campus to work at. and encourage you to continue to work toward that. I had everybody come up and talk about vision because I think vision is so important in getting to where you want to be. You need to think about what it is and why you want to be there. And so there was a lot more information on these posters than what we called out, so I hope you capture all of that for yourselves. And I'm going to invite Ron up here now to talk about what his impressions are of what he just heard.
Thank you very much, Peggy. God, you know, this is, listening to that, this is the place that I want to be. This is pretty cool. The best things about it is self-examination. Being able to be self-critical, be able to look at and to be able to see what is the current state and where we are and where are the opportunities for us to make ourselves better. But we're not, our heads are not bowed. We dealt with this whole wow component, which has to do with if we were to take advantage of the opportunities that are available to us, what our future would look like. I was particularly impressed with the thing that is most important to me, and the fact that you actually focused on it and recognizing where the real value is and what it is that we need to do is to focus on you. We need to focus on your professional development. We need to focus on mentorship. We need to focus on leadership, supervisory skill, focus on your ability to go to professional training so that we can't be the best university that we can possibly be if we don't enable you to be the best staff that you can be. And to the extent that either of those is marginalized, then we handicap our most precious asset, our faculty and our students. So we've got to be able to do much, much better with that. But, you know, I'm telling you what you told me. And so the case for change has been made. We again have the audacity, which is iterated very clearly in 2020, that we say that we want to be a national model. We want to be something that other universities look to. Well, we clearly are in many areas, but there are other areas that we can where we can be better. This is, I think, been a wonderful exercise. The last 3 hours has exceeded my expectations. I really, really want to thank you all for your full engagement. And you know, I remember going to a store one time that the store said, a little sign on it said, if you're happy, tell your friends. If you're unhappy, tell me. So the deal is that we need to know how we can improve. How we can make it better. Because we've got to make sure by the time we have that meeting that I talked about earlier in May or June, where we bring everybody to the table, that we are prepared to actually engage and decide where we're going to go. This is very, very serious work. We do not have the advantage that Berkeley had to hire very expensive hired guns to come in to be able to guide us through this. We need to do as much of this as we can. I want to make sure that there's another point that needs to be reiterated, which is the reason that I remember the cellar picture that I had in the very beginning, and remember the mountaintop. They were put there for a reason, because I really want you to recognize that the things that Peggy talked about that pertain to Berkeley being in that cellar, some of the really, really rough things that Berkeley needed to do. She mentioned that there were 250 positions that were eliminated, half of which were filled. We don't have that issue here. So let that not be the headline that we take out of here. We've had 3 hours where we sat here and we talked about a lot of really good, healthy stuff. We can't allow the message going out of here, well, we don't want anything to do with that Berkeley piece. I mean, they fired 250 people. We can't do that around here. Well, that's the message that somebody is likely to take from here. We can't do that. That is not what excellent looks like. So we can't do that. So I'm going to depend on you not to do that. Before I get to the final piece, as I always try to do, I want to find out, are there any questions? Is there any unreadiness? Does anyone have any? And I hope somebody has. There are no questions that are off limits. Any questions? Any comments? Okay. Well, with that, Peggy, I'm going to ask you to join me on stage. And I want to do what good manners and the university would expect me to do, is to thank you very, very much. Wonderful, wonderful job.
Thank you.
All right. We can consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.